Hello, so I'm Jim Helman. I'm the CTO at MovieLabs. Today I'm here in my role as chair of a camera and lens metadata group that's working in the SMPTE Rapid Industry Solution for on-set virtual production. And I'm joined here by Sam Richards from Disney, who's going to be talking about some related work that the VES is working on. So, camera metadata, has always been a challenge, and there are many other challenges also related to on-set virtual production and this new technology. So SMPTE, I think many of you know, is a long-time standards body that's done a lot of great work for the media and entertainment industry. But when they looked at on-set virtual production, they decided that a new approach was needed, that needed a more inclusive approach and a faster, more agile process than the traditional standards ones. On-set virtual production is a very new and rapidly evolving technology. And so they developed this new process to kind of bring the community together that they're calling a rapid industry solution. And the first of these is one for on-set virtual production. And it still has a lot of the benefits of SMPTE, namely a great forum, a great place where you can have competitors get together in a non-commercial setting to improve things like interoperability. So this RAS launched about a year ago. It has 3 work streams. It has one is on education, one is on outreach, and the third that I'm going to be talking about is related to interoperability. The effort currently has about 40 companies and organizations involved for the purposes of on-set virtual production and especially the camera and lens work. We have representatives from all of the major camera and lens makers, and they're participating very actively. So it's really great that we actually have the right group of people in the room to do this kind of work. So the interoperability work stream, as I said, I think it's kind of early days in on-set virtual production and in-camera VFX. There aren't many standards or even specifications around these things, and a lot of innovation is going on. But what that means is there are kind of few common targets for technology providers. And one of the things that we'd like to do is to try to provide more targets, more ways that we can improve interoperability so that every integration is not a completely custom effort. The interop workstream has a number of different areas. They're looking at generally on-set metadata flows, how do things get into game engine, also things like LED panels, calibration, lighting, the color science. I'm going to be talking about the camera and lens metadata work. And here, it's been a long time problem in the industry. I've been hearing about it for years in my role at MovieLabs, that it would be great if we could get usable metadata from on-set all the way to VFX in a way that it was trusted and could be used. Because today a lot of stuff ends up not getting downstream in a reliable fashion, or when it does, it's not trusted. You don't know how it was computed. And so if we can improve that for VFX, that also will help the on-set virtual production in-camera VFX, which then needs to do all of this, but actually in real time. And from a MovieLabs perspective, we view this as kind of part of a larger problem in media and entertainment workflows where there's not agreement on terminology and the meanings of terms, and then that gets translated into metadata and how assets are organized. And so we've been working on this ontology for media creation that you can find on our website. And this camera metadata is kind of maybe one aspect of a place where we can improve terminology and get more clarity around the definitions of things. So the camera and lens metadata group in this SMPTE group, our goal is really to improve the interoperability of camera metadata and lens, and make sure that it supports on-set virtual production better, and also kind of as a hopeful additional benefit, VFX, so that this metadata can make it downstream in a usable form. So we actually, the organization is focused on onset virtual production, but we actually started with traditional post-VFX. It's a little bit simpler, and as I mentioned before, it's a problem which really has not been solved to date. So we're looking at both of those use cases, both traditional VFX as well as in-camera VFX. There are other use cases that some people have proposed in the group, like looking at hybrid workflows, like the Commandante one that I think you may see in another vETC presentation, and also archive. So we're taking these parameters and we're looking at them, classifying them by whether they're static or dynamic, whether they're need to have or whether they're nice to have, because there are a lot of nice to have parameters, but we haven't even worked through and gotten industry interoperability on the ones that are essential in the majority of workflows. So in our group, we're focused on working iteratively in chunks. So that's why we're not trying to do post-VFX and in-camera VFX and tracking essential parameters as well as optional ones all at once. We're also trying to build on the work of other organizations like the ASC and their framing decision list. The VES has a survey which is also looking at how these parameters are used, and Sam will talk about that in the second half of this presentation. So where are we at currently in our work? The plan is that the outputs would consist of a table with parameter names, descriptions, including the measurement reference points or planes, which are very important in a lot of these optical situations, units, the classification, and also a preferred expression for them. Should it be fractional? Should it be decimal with a certain amount of precision? We also are working on JSON encodings for each of these parameters to make it even more machine interoperable. And as part of that, we're actually writing some sample code that will translate from the different camera makers' output formats into this common JSON format. In the current iteration, we're about done with the essential need-to-have parameters for traditional VFX. And we have like 16 parameters currently. In the need-to-have category, we have 3 different camera file formats that we are ingesting from, and we expect it to be available for broader review by the industry in a couple months. And we'd especially like to get additional review from the traditional VFX community, because we have great representation in this group from the camera makers, lens makers, from a lot of the on-set virtual production ICVFX folks, but we also want to make sure that we're covering the traditional VFX work. We are now beginning to start work on additional items, moving on from the must-have parameters for traditional VFX to those for virtual production. We also are starting to look at tracking metadata for both of those use cases. And then in the future, there's a large backlog of additional items that have been proposed for work in the group, the nice-to-have parameters, and also some additional use cases. Thanks. So here's a sample of where we're at on the essential parameters for VFX. We have about 16 parameters that are currently highlighted there that are going to be part of the initial tranche. We're currently having some discussions on whether you need sensor dimensions in photo sites, as well as the debarred image resolution, and some other items that we may take from the nice-to-have category if they're sufficiently easy. We also have a GitHub, which you can go visit, which actually has the code for translation from 3 of the camera makers, and we'll be expanding that to at least 1 additional camera maker before kind of making this tranche of results available. And for more information, you can check out our GitHub. If you're interested in participating in the SMPTE RAS OSVP, you can reach out to Carrie Grubin, who is heading that effort. And if you're interested in the camera, lens, and tracking metadata work, you can reach out to me. And with that, I will hand things over to Sam Richards, who's going to talk about some related work that's being done at the VES on a survey and also mapping metadata into OpenEXR. So thanks, and if we have time, there'll be some questions at the end.
I'm Sam Richards. My day job is I'm a VFX manager at Disney Imagineering, but in my copious free time, I'm also the secretary for the VS Tech Committee. And part of that, we... next slide. Whoa, now I've gone too far. Thank you. We set up a camera metadata working group just to focus on how camera metadata is used in VFX pipelines. We're not a standards body, so this isn't normally things that we normally work on, but we are trying to work with other groups such as MovieLabs so that we don't diverge. And I think really what we're trying to do is work with VFX artists, find the VFX artists to find out what is it that they actually need, and we're also just trying to focus on the conventional plate-based photography, not the virtual production stuff that Jim's team is currently working on. The members right now include Joseph Goldstone, myself, Michele Scaletti, and Dave Stump, and Cassidy, who's in the back here. Next slide. Thank you. The first task that we did was developing a metadata survey to try and start collecting, like, how are people really using the data, if they get it at all. We've done the survey. We're kind of analyzing the results, and we're going to use the survey participants as resources for additional feedback, in addition to any other people that are willing to help us out with this. So just to be clear what I'm talking about, this is, in theory, the very simple part of taking the raw camera files and turning them into OpenEXR files that things seem to go wildly wrong. The production hub is often using a variety of different software, whether they're using Resolve or they're using Nuke or Transcoder. Somewhere in that process, a lot of data is going missing, and I'm just going to try and highlight some of the kind of issues that we see. So I'm just going to touch on probably two of the many questions that are in the survey results. So for the first one, how often do the end users actually get the data, the metadata from the camera manufacturer? You can see a good chunk of the time they don't get any metadata at all. They don't get it. They don't rely on it. It's really rather sad. So just to highlight why this is, I tried taking some original digital files and push them through three sets of converters: Resolve, Nuke, and the kind of native manufacturer converters. I'm definitely planning to expand to do a test on Transcoder and Baselight as well, and I'm then looking at the OpenEXR files. And this is going to be I guess it's actually not that unreadable with a giant screen behind me, but I think kind of the things to highlight are, you'll see for the different tools, they're actually converting the data in drastically different names. So you, as a developer, you can't really rely on the parameter being the same thing. This is for the ARRI stuff, which is actually rather good. Next slide. For the Sony Venice, there's some pretty wildly variant results if you look at some of the red ones. It's like some of them are doing like the frame rate as a fractional frame rate. Some of them are doing it as a string. Sometimes they're putting units in the string. It's kind of all over the map. And the actual field names, some of them have spaces, some of them have underscores. It's just kind of a crapshoot as to what you're getting, which kind of implies that every single time as an artist, you're going to have to pull out the actual parameter you want to use always by hand. You can't rely on it, or you're going to have some kind of lookup table. This is kind of like highlighting some of the examples. We've got some attributes which are camel case, sometimes with spaces, sometimes underscores. Like the shutter speed is kind of mind-blowing. We've got they're treating both of them as strings, sometimes with spaces in it, sometimes with the units in it. Neither of those are really great answers for that type of attribute. I'm going to skip over that. So back. There we go. Thank you. So another survey result, which I think is pretty good to highlight, is the question of what do people think of as focal length. And you're getting some pretty wildly divergent results. And they are divergent, but they're actually all correct. Because I think one of the things which certainly I didn't really appreciate till I started digging into this is, next slide. There are actually 3 sorts of focal lengths. There's the pinhole focal length that us as CG artists typically use. There's the nominal focal length, which is the numbers on the side of the lens. And there's the effective focal length that a lot of the lens manufacturers often are using. And that's also used in the lens distortion mapping. And these 3 are not the same value. So we're really, it's no wonder that artists are often confused and just don't trust the results that they're getting. I did do, this is another great, horrific slide of far too much data, which I'll summarize in a sec. Essentially what I tried doing is grabbing the attribute data from different renderers, and I'll try and summarize it a little bit in the next slide. There are a lot of, what is really interesting is all the different manufacturers of renderers are pretty much using the same parameters. They're all assuming there's a sensor size, which bizarrely is most often not actually in any of the metadata that we're getting from any of the camera manufacturers. They all seem to have bokeh effects defined. So it would be great if the lens manufacturers could actually put in something as simple as what the number of the slices of the shutter would be. A lot of them can also support SD maps directly into the render. So we don't have to do a post-warp in Nuke. We can do the warping directly for the lens distortion directly in the renderer. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here to do really interesting work, in terms of cleaning up a lot of the metadata, getting it easier for artists to use. There is some great work being done by Cook and I think you'll see that in the Commandante talk that's coming up next. In that they're starting to characterize their lenses as part of the delivery to you. So that characterization of what the lens distortion looks like, particularly for anamorphic lenses, could be something that we could get those kind of SD maps, or at least get the equations directly into the renderer. I think what does need a little bit of love is how do we get that translation layer when we're doing the debarring all the way through the pipeline, so that we're actually seeing the actual usable data as an artist when you actually get to do the match move. So this is the email for our working group. You can hopefully snap it if you've got the QR code. Definitely contact us if this is anything that you think you can help us with. It's definitely early days, and I think there's a lot of work that we're going to be doing with a number of different groups to hopefully make this process a lot smoother. And with that, that's it. Do we have time for Q&A? Or yep. Thank you. Any questions? Nope.
If there's any questions from the audience, I have a mic if you want to come on over. No?
Nope. They're all shy.
They're very shy. It is a shy crowd.
Okay.
Where should folks?
Oh, there we go.
Dan, reliable. Here we
Thank you,
go.
Dan.
I can't let a question go unasked. So, out of all this out of all this fantastic work that you're doing, if you could wave a magic wand and solve one problem today, what would that be?
I think at least to get some metadata to the artist consistently 100% of the time would be good. Getting the names consistent would be a second one.
Yeah. Yes. Very good.
Jim?
I think that getting the metadata downstream in a way that it's usable and people know how it was computed and what it represents is essential, which is why you need the definitions and metadata that includes how it was computed. And that's one of the reasons some of these translation tools, if we can open source some of those or get them out there more available, it'll be completely transparent exactly how that metadata, was translated from the original source, to its final endpoint. And also, hopefully, you are still carrying the original metadata as well as a normalized form of it, because I think that also is important for the trustworthiness of the data downstream, is the provenance. This is the original metadata, this is the derived metadata, and if you want, you can verify it and recompute it.
Nice one. Thank you.
Very good. Do we have any more questions? I think I have time for one more, maybe. It is a shy crowd. Well, thank you so much for coming. Oh, yeah, hi.
It's more for Jim. So on the OSVP RIS, like what's the time frame for that? Like trying to come to some form of, I don't know, first version proof of concept around the metadata.
Yeah, so on the metadata, as I mentioned, we're trying to do it in pieces and put out pieces. So the first piece, which is the camera and lens essential parameters for traditional VFX, probably in a couple months we'll have a version that we can share. The GitHub is public, so you can already see a little bit of what's going on there. We're trying to make the process be, more open. After that, we'll take on some of these other areas, and frankly, I don't know how long it's going to take because, especially for the on-site virtual, there are so many details around timing and synchronization that if you start trying to cover all of those, it's going to be more challenging. Which is why we did the traditional VFX first. Mm-hmm. I think probably tracking is going to come out a little bit quicker. Okay. So maybe the traditional VFX tracking, and then the essential stuff for in-camera VFX. In general, we're putting this stuff out as a form of sharing. There could also be downstream from the SMPTE, from the RIS OSVP process, there could be standardization of some of these things. They could actually be taken into a standards process in SMPTE and documented more formally in that way. But we wanted to do this less formal process so that we could actually get stuff out there and start getting feedback on it.
That's brilliant. No, that's really good. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for coming. We can go ahead and cut, and we'll wrap up.
Yep. Thanks for the invitation.